everyone, and thank you for joining us today. This will be our last all things Disciplined Agile webinar for the year. And I just wanted to take a moment to kind of reflect back, thank everybody for attending the various webinars throughout the year since we've started doing this. Thank all the guest speakers that have attended. And we've been kind of building, and I think today's topic and today's speaker is a culmination of everything that everybody has been striving to get to, which is talking about a successful transformation over many years, got where it's gotten to the point of being now at scale. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Karen Lewis from Franklin Templeton to talk about some of the challenges and the opportunities that they saw over a multi-year period. And the tagline that I put in for Karen is, "It's never complete." And when we were kind of going through and talking about the topic for today, one of the things that Karen shared was that, you're never complete, right? We've heard other thought leaders, Scott Ambler on one of the previous webinars talked about the goal being to become a learning organization. So there's no end state to your Agile adoption or your enterprise transformation or whatever name you might have associated with it. And with that, Karen, I would like to turn it over to you, and if you can introduce yourself, and we'll get right into it.
Sure. My name is Karen Lewis. I'm a VP within Franklin Templeton within the technology area. I have responsibility for the transformation office as well as our technology PMO, and I've been with Franklin for just over 23 years.
Fantastic. Yeah. And again, if we saw earlier this month, we had the beginning of an Agile transformation to DA. We had the challenges with getting a transformation to DA going. And I'll ask you, Karen, if you could kind of take us back through a little bit of where you started. I'm assuming, like most organizations, Franklin Templeton's journey started off with moving from a waterfall or a more traditional approach.
Yes, we were very much a traditional shop. We had all of the bells and whistles that are surrounding what a traditional shop would look like. We tried probably about 10 plus years ago to go to Scrum, and it didn't really work for us. That a lot of our leaders felt like it was a little bit too cowboy for them. It didn't feel like it had the controls or the kind of checks and balances that we needed as a financial services firm to really be able to deploy something to production for our customers. And then we went into this phase that I'd call almost agile, right? Where we were iterative and, we thought we were doing such a great job, but we were really just doing a lot of, mini waterfall initiatives and kind of going through the process, but trying to do it really, really quickly. And so finally, about a little over 4 years ago, we were introduced to Scott Ambler and Associates and Disciplined Agile, and we really started in one business unit, really trying to focus on, well, how can we get better at delivery, and how can we get better at tying delivery to actual value for the business. And so, we really went on that agile journey and started training folks and training our project teams, et cetera. And, at some point, I started to realize that agile changes everything, and we needed to start thinking bigger than just looking at project teams. And so we started really focusing on disciplined agile at scale. And that's where we are right now, is really looking at how do we continue our agile journey, but recognizing that agile changes everything, looking at how do we change our processes, our team structures, our the way that work flows through the organization, all of our prioritization processes, all of those things, to really take advantage of agile and lean practices to really optimize our delivery.
So if you go back to, since you've been with the company so long, and if you think back to where you said the organization looked to adopt Scrum, there might have been some challenges, like you said, it can be a little bit loose, especially 10 years ago. And then as things obviously progress, and if you got to this not really Scrum or Scrum Bud or Agile or all these other interesting tags that are associated with some of the Scrum approaches these days, What were some of the things that were more challenging to overcome? Did any of the teams feel, well, we are doing Scrum, we have a product owner, we're doing a daily Scrum. What do you mean we're going to now look to something else?
Yeah, we had a few teams that felt that they were already agile and that they didn't need to do anything that was to optimize the way that they were working. And when we dug in a little bit deeper, we found, you know, smaller anti-patterns that really translated into big uh, challenges. So things like uh, we still had a lot of project managers that were really running the show, where the product owners were abdicating responsibility to these project managers who were really acting as almost proxy type product owners. So not really having a true business person acting as a product owner and really driving the delivery towards that value. Having a lot of project team members participating in some of the demos, but not getting a lot of the really key business stakeholders engaged in the demos. So people were still surprised at the end of the day when they were getting deliveries because they weren't involved in the overall process. And not being able, we found a lot of dysfunction between projects and business as usual work, and not being able to really balance the two sets of work. So one would always suffer, where we weren't either doing really well on the business as usual, or we weren't meeting our obligations on the project work. And so really, struggling with how do we really get to figure out how to integrate all of this together. So those were just a couple examples of some of the anti-patterns that were existing.
Hmm. So, although the Scrum team, the Scrum Master, the product owner, and then the team members are very similar to the Disciplined Agile delivery team, with one big distinction being the architect owner role, and bringing another explicitly named role, especially somebody who has the focus and decisions from a product standpoint in the technology space. Did that also help as you moved away from Scrum? As sometimes there's just, again, Scrum doesn't have the same level of maybe focus in that space.
Absolutely. I think that technology felt like a forgotten partner in Scrum, in that they didn't feel the same level of accountability and ownership in Scrum that they should feel. Everybody in the team should feel a sense of ownership and accountability. But because there wasn't this explicitly called out role where they're a part of the overall leadership, there was a sense of a feeling of giving up control, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
Whereas when we started to bring in Disciplined Agile and we started to talk through the role of the architecture owner, we really got to a place where technology felt like they were equal partners with business, where we were really driving towards solutions that were not only driving value to the business, but that were honoring the technology strategies for the firm. And so really balancing both of those things, and creating the natural tension that should exist
Yeah.
between a product owner and an architecture owner, to really ensure that we were doing the right thing in the right way, for the firm.
Yeah. What a great point. That healthy tension that we want to be able to see between those two roles, right? Which the dynamic changes just by having that architecture owner role. And also, I think most teams and organizations that embrace that also see that they have a higher probability of really achieving a risk value life cycle, where we are looking at addressing risk and in a different way.
Hmm. Absolutely.
So, Franklin Templeton's definitely been one of those success stories. I know that you've been at DA for 3-4 years now.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
Can you share a little bit of just sort of what that journey as it unfolded, as you moved from Scrum, or the Scrum-ish type of approach, and getting into DA to where you're at now at scale?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, we kind of started out really focused in one business unit or one business area, and started looking at kind of training whole project teams and kind of getting teams on this disciplined agile track, and defining roles and responsibilities within those teams, and being really crystal clear about who's doing what and when and how. And we really got to a place where we got, um, broadly speaking, just a good set of buy-in between the business and the technology leadership, where we agreed that we would be partners in this overall exercise. We agreed that we needed to do something differently, and that we would look at these new roles as opportunities for us to be able to partner in a different way. And so as we looked at this execution model, having that executive buy-in really helped those teams to really move forward more effectively. And in that model of training teams, kind of just in time training, so training teams as they had initiatives, and moving them forward, we found early successes coming forward, and started expanding past that one business unit into additional business units. I think that, back to what some of the challenges with Scrum, where there was a feeling that we didn't have the checks and balances, really being able to use those goal based and the milestones within disciplined agile life cycles really gave the assurances to senior leadership that there were those checks and balances, that we were ensuring that we were doing the right thing, like proving architecture early and things like that, that we had never done before. And that we found that we were, getting delivery in a way that was much more effective, much more valuable to the business than we had before. I mean, don't get me wrong, we still had churn, we still had all those things. Teams are going to struggle in the ways that they struggle, as any team would, but we were able to catch them really early and be able to redirect them in ways. And so in microcosms, we were really effective. And what we did find was that we started to buck against our culture, so bigger picture. So we were finding like things like our funding model wasn't fitting the way that agile teams worked, and so that was starting to hold us back. The way our teams are structured, the hierarchical structures were starting to grate against the way the teams are structured. And you'd have managers kind of jumping into teams and trying to do the work that they would normally do on a waterfall project. And so it was those types of things that started driving us to seeing we needed to start looking at this in a much bigger way. We couldn't just continue to just train teams and have them execute that way. And then, just to finish off kind of our disciplined agile as itself journey, was we did create quite a few series of communities of practice, for our team leads, for our architecture owners, for our product owners. We now have one for our agile leaders, and really helping us to continue to evolve those ways of working. So being able to say, what's working right now, what's not working, what do we need to tweak, what additional tools do we have that may be able to help solve this problem or that problem. Lots of things like that that really help to evolve each team and empower each person to be able to solve some of their challenges.
Oh. So Barbie asks the question, and it's one that I actually had for you as well. Being in the financial services industry, and having compliance and regulation aspects, and having governance concerns, were there any challenges in moving to DA where there isn't just one particular approach? So Scrum, we've talked on many of these webinars. Yes, there is a prescriptive approach. With DA, there isn't. So there's many approaches. What types of challenges did you have in getting buy-in for governance and support of DA?
So we did have some challenges early on with our internal audit and our external audit actually as well. And we ended up having to sit down and really explain what disciplined agile was, what the life cycles were, and what the goals-based approach to agile really meant. So what did it mean what kind of artifacts would we be creating? What would those artifacts look like? How would they, what would they appear? Who would be approving them? What would approval even look like in a agile world? And so we ended up, we're governed by SOX compliance. So we ended up mapping and evolving our SOX criteria, our internal controls matrix, to be more agile. So we adapted our artifacts to match our controls that come out of an agile initiative, and we made them as lightweight as possible. So there are a couple of non-negotiables that need to be delivered to make sure that we meet our SOX compliance. But outside of that, there's a lot of flexibility for the teams, so that they, as long as they can produce some of these artifacts or produce evidence of this particular activity occurring, they've got lots of wiggle room within that particular kind of framework, between that particular kind of guardrail. So we definitely had a lot of challenge. It took a while to get audit comfortable with not having a big, 300-page document that someone physically signed and said that this was it. And, trying to explain, here's a document that we wrote 2 years ago. Here's the system that we actually delivered. They don't match at all. What would you rather have? And so we talk through kind of some of those elements, and that really helped to solidify or to cement what it meant to be agile and how agile would really work well with audit.
So I've had the opportunity to work with a few customers in the same industry, and it's been kind of a mixed bag as far as the external auditors buy-in. So I'm interested, was that an easier or harder than getting your internal audit team to kind of understand the approach for governance and how maybe what you're going to be doing was better than what you've got from a waterfall standpoint?
Definitely harder. It was harder because the external auditors just didn't understand agile. It's easy to understand waterfall with very defined phases.
Yep.
And each phase came out with an artifact, and that artifact or that document became an artifact that was auditable. And you looked through the document and you found a signature, and that was your artifact. Instead, I'm asking them to look through an extract of JIRA and be able to see that user that sprints or iterations are actually moved to production, or that we've got sign-offs in those ways and they've approved and things like that. So trying to translate or map them was very difficult for the external auditors. We had to do a lot of, what we ended up doing was a lot of exercise audits. So we take a past audit or example projects, and we would walk them through what would an audit look like, and here's how we would satisfy this particular requirement for SOX, and this is what the approval would look like. And then we made sure we documented in our internal controls matrix specifically what is the requirement for the teams to be able to satisfy that particular control. And so once we were able to go through that, which was painful, but once we were able to go through that, we've had great success. I'm going to knock on wood because you never know when that changes, but we've had great success thus far.
Kirk asks, did the acquisition of DA by PMI affect your teams at all, or how your managers regard your teams?
So we were nervous in the beginning with the acquisition, just because we have a lot of people who are PMI certified, and we often would tell our teams when they were going for their PMP, kind of take off your project management hat and put on your PMI hat, and really think in your utopian state of what managing a project would look like, and answer your questions that way. And so our concern was really, would that happen to DA? Would we lose the pragmatism that DA is known for? I'm happy to say that thus far we haven't seen that happening, and it doesn't feel like that's happening. And so that has been really good. What has changed, or what is changing, is that I think it's created a even better cachet for DA than it's had in the past, right? It was a
Oh
little
yeah.
bit more recognized and more solidified as a real certification because it's recognized by PMI and kind of sits within the PMI family. So I think more so than anything, it's almost made it much more recognizable and much more real to people than it has in the past. Whereas, before, DA was just Karen's thing that she's trying to bring into the organization. Now it's this thing that's really a real thing in the industry.
Yeah, yeah, we're seeing that much more as well. So John asks, how did you get your product owners to step up and take the business lead from the PMs? I see this pretty often. The Peter Principle, leadership management malpractice, when a product owner does not know their business well enough to prioritize their backlog. Exclamation point.
Yeah. So it's still a work in progress for us. And for us, it's probably that the challenge is our PMs are so uber responsible and accountable that they see a gap and they feel they have to fill it. And in some ways, we have to hold our PMs back a little bit to be able to say, you need to let that team figure it out. Like, you need to let the product owner figure out the role. And
Mhm.
I think that in some cases it is what results is a more difficult conversation, either with the product owner or sometimes with the product owner's leader, to say, is this the right person for the role? So do they have enough time to be able to dedicate, right? A lot of the product owners have a day job that they have to
Yeah.
to go to, and because of that they don't have enough time to dedicate to being a true product owner or getting into enough detail to be able to make decisions, or they don't, as the person had asked, they don't have enough knowledge and experience in the particular domain to be able to truly prioritize. One of the other problems we have is a lot of our product owners don't have the enterprise view, so they can myopically prioritize their particular backlog, but not necessarily having that enterprise view to say, you know what, we've got enough here, this is good enough for us to go. We don't have to go all the way down to the bottom of our backlog list. There's probably something else, and from an enterprise perspective, that's more important. Let's have a look at what that looks like. And so, some of those awarenesses or challenges that we have. So, what has to solve the challenge has been really having radical candor type conversations with either, like I said, either the product owner or that product owner's leader, to make
Mhm.
sure you have the right person. Because often it's, I have a need, I have a person who has 10% capacity, I'm going to put that person with the need, and then
Yeah.
they can it solved my problem, instead of really saying, is this the right person for the job?
Yeah, that can be such a challenge. I see that a lot where you might have somebody that's put into the position and they have expertise in a particular area of the product or maybe in a particular market. And they might not be necessarily that open or have relationships with the people that are the subject matter experts or that are, really their peers in these other areas, and not taking those perspectives in.
Mhm.
And that just continues on. So often there's just not enough, like you said, the radical candor and being able to say it's okay if we have to rotate somebody out. I mean, this is one of the critical roles. I mean, everybody's important, but the product owner role is so important to get correct and be
Mhm.
cognizant of that. And it just, so many times that that doesn't happen in organizations, or it doesn't happen soon enough.
Well, and for the product owner as well to say, I may not know everything, but I can go out and get the knowledge from the other people. And
Right.
that's part of my accountability, is to get that knowledge, synthesize it, and come back with the right decision, and do it as quickly as I possibly can. And so, to augment my other answer, is really just to make sure that that person's willing to do that work, right? It's not easy to corral all those cats and get them all on the same page and figure out where the business really needs to go.
Yeah. We probably have time for one more question. And I apologize to everybody in attendance. We're not going to be able to get to all of these because time goes so quickly. But Fred asks, do you have product management that acts as the product owner of product owners?
So we're exploring that now. We've been thinking about the strategy element of the product management, and then thinking about product ownership as almost a day-to-day tactical. So, day-to-day tactical in the projects themselves, but that there's a role that kind of sits above that, that's more of a strategy. And so that owns the bigger picture vision for a particular product. So where we're exploring some of these products and product models, which is our next evolution, we've got some people who are starting to play that role of product manager, and really trying to keep themselves at that strategy level and acting as an escalation point for those product owners to really ensure that they remain, centered on that North Star of where the product needs to go. So yes, definitely something we're exploring.
Yeah, fantastic. So we do have some other questions, and I'll ask Karen maybe if we can either do a blog on this, or I'm going to pull up a
Sure.
slide in just a moment. As far as we have a forum that we're getting more and more traction to get people to go to share things from a DA perspective. But
Sure.
Karen, I do want to thank you. Having a senior executive and having a senior leadership team member take time to be able to share with the community is just always fantastic, and really appreciate you coming and sharing the success that you and everybody at Franklin Templeton has achieved. It's not easy to do these types of transformations, and yeah, I mean it's fantastic to hear how well it's worked for you.
Well, thank you for having me. And as you started out, it's not over. I think we're kind of now in a almost a reinvigoration of our transformation as we look at it at scale. So it's exciting to see.
Yeah, fantastic. Let me do one quick share here. Let's see if everybody can see my screen. So yes, for anybody that has any questions on training, assessments, agility, health checks, coaching services, and so forth, please come see us at processmentors.com. And I've been pulling this set of slide, or this slide with a little bit of graphics on it, that we do have an All Things Disciplined Agile forum, and we're starting to get things like people advertising some open job recs that are looking for some specific criteria in the Disciplined Agile space. We've got an instructor and coach corner, so we're seeing lots of activity between the instructors, sharing little tips and tricks and what they're finding with the new courses that are tied to the PMI's Agile certification journey, and then just general questions and so forth. And we've got lots of forums and sub forums, some international, non-English forums, I shouldn't say international, but non-English. And yeah, it's just easy to go to. And the only thing at that site is the forum, the board itself. Upcoming training, I'm thrilled to say that we've got the DASM, the Disciplined Agile Scrum Master training. Glenn Little and I are co-delivering a number of these trainings, along with an Agile and Lean boot camp, as well as the new Disciplined Agile Senior Scrum Master starting in January. And we will have one more webinar to conclude this year. And what an interesting year it's been. So Karen will come back along with Anitra and Jimmy, and this is one of our Ask Me Anythings, where the entire 30 minutes is driven by the questions that you ask. So if you're watching this live, or for anybody that might be watching it on a recording, think up some really good questions. Not often will you get the wealth of experience and knowledge that somebody like Karen has. So I would urge all of you to take advantage of thinking through some questions and coming back and posting them. Once again, Karen, thank you, and thanks everyone else. And we will see you next week.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.